Class 12, welcome back. Hope you're all doing fine. Today I resume the lesson 2 of your biology book, Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. In the previous two classes, we studied about these two structures. Can you identify them? The number one is pollen, which contains the male gamete, and the second one is ovule, which carries the female gamete. Now see the structure of male gamete. Can you find a flagella or some cilia in it? No. So how is it going to reach the female gamete for fertilization? Now here you can see the female gamete with the egg cell. Can you see something for locomotion? No. So how can fertilization take place? For pollen to reach ovule, it needs a carrier or an agent. So our learning goals for this class are to be able to answer these questions. I'm sure you might be aware of answers to at least some of these questions. So just pause and try to write down the answers that you already know. Now this is how pollen reaches stigma from anther if the two are on the same flower. And transfer of pollen grain shed from anther to stigma of a pistil is known as pollination. Usually the process requires help from certain agents. These agents can be wind, water, some animal such as an insect. Now when do these agents become essential? When for some reason plant's own pollen cannot pollinate its own ovule. When does this happen? We'll discuss that very soon. Now, if you recall in lesson 1, we had done 3 situations with respect to sexuality in organisms. The bisexual flowers, unisexual flowers, but both male and female flowers in same plant, that is monoecious, and unisexual flowers with male flower on one plant and female flower on another plant. So male plant and female plant are different, that is dioecious. Now based on this, sources of pollen for pollination can be from same flower, from different flower of same plant, or from a different plant altogether. And on this basis of source of pollination can be of 3 types. The 3 types of pollination are autogamy, geitonogamy and xenogamy. Now, auto means self. So, autogamy is self-pollination. You can easily conclude that a bisexual flower which has both anther and ovary can pollinate itself. So self-pollination would be normal here. But here both anther and stigma are exposed. So pollens can fly off or be carried to other flowers too. Similarly, stigma can receive pollen from other flowers too. So for complete autogamy, 2 conditions are required. Anther and stigma are very close and they are not exposed, and there is synchronization in maturation of the male and the female gamete, or we can say the maturation of ovule and pollen. Now how can a flower ensure that stigma or anther are not exposed? Let's see. This is a mature flower of violet, this is of oxalis, and this is of commelina. What is common among these flowers? They are all closed. Their petals never open. Such flowers are known as cleistogamous. Here, flowers never open and strictly self-pollination takes place. Now, what would be the advantage of this? Assured seed setting. No dependence on any pollinating agent. Now you know depending on pollinating agent requires 2 input cost. One is a large number of pollen grains will have to be produced. So cleistogamous flower need not produce a large number of pollen grain. Second, pollen grains should have certain characteristic so that they are carried by the pollinating agent. The characteristic will be doing very soon. Flower should have bright petals, nectars to attract insects or certain other characteristic. A cleistogamous flower need not invest in all this. So low input cost, but there are disadvantages, and the major disadvantage of Keistogamous flowers are there is no genetic variability, since the male and female gamete both are derived from the same plant. In contrast to Cleistogamous, the open flowers are known as Chasmogamous. Both Oxalis and Commelina bear Cleistogamous as well as Chasmogamous flowers. So Cleistogamy is sort of plan B for these plants, just in case Chasmogamous flowers fail to pollinate. Now, Geitonogamy is when pollen is transferred from one flower of a plant to another flower of the same plant. Now, is this self or cross pollination? You can say it's cross because a pollinating agent is involved, but since both flowers are from same plant, they are genetically alike, so no genetic variability is being introduced. So here it is like self-pollination or autogamy. Now, xenogamy is transfer of pollen from flower of one plant to flower of a different plant. This is cross-pollination in true sense, and here genetic variability is ensured. Now, the agents of pollination, they can be classified into two categories, biotic and abiotic. Among the common biotic ones are these, and the abiotic ones are these. Now, here you have to make note of two very important things. Most plants use biotic agents. Abiotic are used by lesser number of plants. And second, plants produce large number of pollens to compensate for loss of pollen, because pollination is very uncertain. There are no guarantees that pollen will land on correct stigma at the correct time. So, in cross-pollination, large number of pollens have to be produced. Now let's take a look at the agents and how they work. Now, wind pollination or anemophily. These are the characters of wind pollinated or anemophilous flowers. You can justify each of these characters by remembering two things. First, that wind blows away lighter objects more easily, and second, wind does not need color, fragrance or nectar. These are there to attract the insects. And now finally a few examples. Corn. The hairy tassels you see on corn are actually the stigma and the style, that is part of the pistils. The grasses, the white dust cloud that you see here is actually pollen. Now you must know that our cereal grains are also botanically grasses. They belong to the same family, that is Poaceae. This include wheat, rice. In fact, you have studied about bamboo. That too is a grass, a very long grass. Water pollination or hydrophily is very rare. There are only about 30 genera, all of monocots, which show hydrophily. But this mode is very common for transporting gametes in lower plants, algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes. In fact, do you recall why we call bryophytes as amphibians of plant kingdom? So you would expect all aquatic plants to be water pollinated, but even that is not so. Some aquatic plants are water pollinated, such as Vallisneria and Hydrilla. In Vallisneria, the pollen grains of the entire male plant are released on water surface, and with the help of water current, pushing them reach the female flowers. Female flowers have long stalks so that they are able to reach the surface of water. Now some marine flowers like Zostera, a seagrass, is also water pollinated, but here the pollen are released underwater. But then there are aquatic plants such as water hyacinth, water lily that are wind or insect pollinated. So you can see not all aquatic plants are water pollinated. Can you guess the characteristic of flowers which are water pollinated? Do they need to be bright and colorful? Do they need to produce nectar? No. What they need is to protect them from water, from being damaged by constantly being in water. For this, they have a mucilaginous coating that protects them from rotting by being continuously in contact with water. Now, pollination through animals. The most common ones we'll be doing is insect pollination or entomophily, the most common being the bees, bats, birds, primates, tree-dwelling rodents, reptiles. Now the characteristic of animal pollinated flowers. The bee pollinated flower will be large, colorful, fragment and with nectar. If these are small, they'll be clustered in inflorescence so that they appear bigger than their actual size. Now, in case of bee pollinated flower, the animal which is visiting the flower should get something in return for which it would be attracted to the flower. This thing which the animal gets in return from the flower is known as floral reward. So in case of bees, the floral reward is pollen grain and nectar. Flies and beetle pollinated flower will produce a foul odor because that is what attracts the flies and beetles. Now there are certain special cases that we need to do. The first one is Amorphophallus flower. Amorphophallus flowers are huge, up to 6 feet tall. So they provide the insects a place to lay eggs. Now this is an image of the Amorphophallus flowers. You can see the size of this flower. Now this is another special case of yucca and moth. The development of yucca seeds and moth egg occurs simultaneously. The moth lays eggs in the ovule of the ovary of yucca. It pollinates the plants simultaneously. So floral reward for moth is a shelter for its eggs. The caterpillar of moth develops inside the ovary and in fact it eats away half of its seeds. It's a good thing that yucca produces about 200 seeds. So you can see the ovary locules and the moth. Now with this we come to the end of this session. These are a few questions that you can solve to check the understanding of your topic. Good luck and bye-bye.